I'd always been interested in making things. As a kid I sort of made model aeroplanes. I never bought kits, I always designed my own and built my own. But it was my daughter who got me interested in the customising of motorcycles. She showed me photos of the K100s that have been customised, and at the age of about 60 I guess, I thought, yeah, that'd be a good little thing to do. Hello, my name is Vic. I'm 68 years old. I've been customising motorcycles for a few years now. And this is the most recent bike that I've finished. It's a 1983 BMW R65. I've essentially copied this bike from one that I saw on the internet a few years ago, and that bike was made by the Gasoline Motor Company down in Sydney, and it was called Lucille, named after a Lancaster bomber that this fellow's grandfather flew in during the Second War. So I've named my bike Marjorie after my mum. It's pretty similar, but different in quite a few ways. I've told people that this is the last bike I'm building. I've got a few other things I want to do in life besides motorbikes, and I'd like to spend more time riding them now than building them. There's a lot of favourite features, but the main ones I think would be the wooden foot pegs. I had a friend of mine's father-in-law turn those up on his lathe. They're quite unique. The battery box, that's a plywood box covered in copper sheet. The leather strap, even though the original bike has a similar strap, I've done this one quite differently and made this brass plate to go on the back there. So the whole thing itself is quite unique. The ignition key is just a little silky oak cap that I turn down. That's the ignition key there. So it just doesn't really need to come out of the bike, it can just sort of stay there. There's a lot of brass on this bike. I've got Royal Enfield master cylinder and clutch perch, but in India they also cast some brass levers, so I use those. And lastly, the final thing would be these little silky oak pieces of timber that I've screwed into the triple trees there. Normally a bracket to support the instrument gauge and headlight would bolt on there, so I've just screwed these in here. I bought the bike from a gentleman down in Nerang, and he told me that he bought it from a fellow in northern New South Wales. It wasn't until I got the bike home that I found out that it had been underwater. When I stripped the engine, I found out that I had two different cylinders. The bike had broken an exhaust valve at some stage. This one here was the replacement, second-hand one, and that was cast iron. And on the other side was a Nickersill. They're fairly easy motors to work on. I had a friend of mine help me. The carburetors, I fully rebuilt those. I enjoy doing those. I get a lot of confidence out of riding on the machines that I know I've serviced and worked on. I've never been a rider to sort of like ride really fast around the corners and things like that. But I have this little saying, I talk about my body preservation instinct. Like you sacrifice body preservation for excitement. And I know there are probably some guys that ride with about a 10% body preservation instinct and they get 90% excitement. I sort of ride with about 50-50, but every now and then I might increase the excitement level to get a bit more fun. And that's at a sacrifice to your body preservation. So I just ride within my limits. I'm not reckless. Yeah, I always make sure my bikes, that I service my bikes well. If I had to give any recommendations to young riders, it would just be ride within your limits and don't be too reckless. Yeah, I got started in motorcycling at the age of 30. I was living at Mount Gloria, so I started as a commuter rider, and then I got into the customising side of it, but I really had no friends who I could go riding with, and I got introduced to the Brisbane Cafe races, and then they told me about DGR. This was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and I've done the rides ever since. I look forward to them. They ride for a great cause. It's a huge event, not just in Australia, all around the world. I think there's over 120 countries where they ride, raising money for men's mental health and prostate cancer. But it's the camaraderie, the pre-ride, catching up with friends, looking at new bikes, the banter we have, and then of course there's the ride itself. Absolutely lovely being part of a big bunch of guys riding motorcycles. So I'll keep going for as long as I can keep walking and hopping on a motorbike.
Bendix Moto. Ride with confidence.